Okay, here's a fun one. Did you know that back in 1946, right after World War II, President Harry Truman tried to buy Greenland?
Oh, I love this story.
And I don't mean he, sent a polite diplomatic cable asking for a price check.
No.
He literally offered Denmark $100 million in physical gold bars.
Actual gold bars. It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? Just crates of bullion on a ship.
It really does. And, back then, Denmark politely said no. They saw it as this sort of absurd post-war American power move. And, well, everyone just kind of laughed it off.
A fun historical footnote.
Exactly. But here we are. It is January 17th, 2026. And looking at the headlines this week, $100 million in gold sounds like a very polite, almost gentlemanly suggestion compared to what's happening right now.
Absolutely. The whole era of diplomatic pleasantries on this topic is, well, it's effectively over. We aren't talking about gold bars and handshakes anymore.
Not even close.
We are looking at a situation where United States foreign policy regarding Greenland has shifted from diplomatic inquiry to what the sources in our stack are calling coercive annexation.
Welcome to Critical Path Podcast.
It's good to be here.
Usually you know us as the people who get excited about boats stuck in canals or, why your toaster's on back order. But today we are talking about a supply chain disruption that might just accidentally delete NATO.
It is a supply chain story at its absolute core, but the stakes have just escalated to an existential level. We're watching logistics bleed directly into warfare.
Exactly. This is Critical Path, where we explore stories and innovations about our global supply chain that connect our world to your everyday life. I'm your host, and I am so ready to get into this because, frankly, the source material this week reads like a Tom Clancy novel that someone accidentally filed in the nonfiction section.
That's a perfect description.
I mean, we are talking about the United States threatening to invade a peaceful island of 57,000 fishermen. Why?
To put it as simply as possible, vitamins.
Vitamins.
Vitamins for missiles. And we are going to explore why the U.S. is willing to risk a blue-on-blue war, that's a war between allies, just to get their hands on some very, very specific rocks.
Okay, let's get into the weeds on this. Because on the surface, threatening an invasion for rocks seems, primitive.
Right.
It feels like we're back in the Bronze Age. Or playing a game of civilization where you declare war just to get a resource tile on the map. What is the actual driver here?
So you have to understand the U.S. military not just as a fighting force, not just as, people in uniforms holding rifles, but as a massive industrial organism.
Okay.
And that organism feeds on a very specific diet of rare earth elements, or REs.
We hear about rare earths all the time in tech, right? They're in our phones, our batteries, the motors in our electric cars.
Right. But in the context of defense, think of REs as the vitamins of the military body. You can build the muscle, the steel hull of a Virginia-class submarine, or the titanium body of a Sidewinder missile. That's the big stuff, the macronutrients.
The protein and the carbs.
Exactly. But without these vitamins, the muscle doesn't work. The guidance fins on that missile don't move. The electric drives in that submarine don't spin.
So you essentially have $1 billion paperweight without these little elements.
Precisely. And the resource security analysis we're looking at today makes it crystal clear that this is the primary driver. It's not just about territory. It's about keeping the entire machine running. And the reason we are in this crisis in 2026 is China.
Ah, the China problem. I feel like we've been talking about this supply chain concentration risk for, a decade?
Yeah.
Why is it finally boiling over right now?
We have been talking about it, but by 2025, the numbers just became, impossible to ignore. China controlled something like 70% of global mining for rare earths, which is bad.
That's bad.
But the processing, they controlled nearly 90% of the processing capabilities.
90%. That's a monopoly in anyone's book. But hang on, why is the processing the real bottleneck? I've seen reports saying we have mines in California, specifically Mountain Pass. Why can't we just use that?
We do, but here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, really dangerous. It's not just any rare earths. It's specifically the heavy rare earth elements, or HREs.
HREs, okay.
We're talking about elements like dysprosium and terbium. Mountain Pass, the big U.S. mine, mostly produces light rare earths, lanthanum, cerium. Those are great for, polishing glass or making catalytic converters, but they are not what you need for guiding a missile.
Dysprosium and terbium. They sound like planets from Star Wars.
Yeah.
What makes them so special physically? Why can't we just substitute them with something else?
It all comes down to something called the Curie temperature. These elements act like magic for high-performance magnets. If you use a standard neodymium magnet, like the really strong ones you might buy online, and you heat it up, it loses its magnetism.
It just becomes a lump of metal.
It demagnetizes, it becomes useless. And I assume a missile flying at Mach 4 generates a significant amount of heat.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Exactly. Friction makes things incredibly hot. If you don't have dysprosium doped into that magnet alloy, the magnet fails at high temperatures. Your guidance fins stop moving. Your entire system shuts down in mid-flight.
Wow.
And China has a near-total monopoly on these heavy elements because their clay deposits in the south are uniquely rich in them, and crucially, they have the dirty, complex chemical plants required to separate them.
So the logic, the nightmare scenario in the Pentagon is that if China decides to turn off the tap, the U.S. military effectively just stops working.
That is the chokehold. And in 2026, the administration looked at that reality and decided this risk was no longer tolerable. They stopped asking nicely for alternatives. They needed a non-Chinese source of heavy rare earths, and they needed it yesterday.
And that brings us inevitably to Greenland.
Yeah.
Now, I've looked at the geological surveys in our source materials. Greenland is huge, it's icy, and it's mostly empty. Is the interest just because it's, relatively close to North America, or is there something genuinely unique about the rocks there?
It's geological destiny. Greenland isn't just a big block of ice. Underneath that ice, it hosts two specific deposits that make geologists, and I'm not exaggerating, weep with joy.
Weep with joy?
I mean, legitimate tears of joy. It's arguably the most strategic geological real estate on the entire planet right now.
Okay, walk us through the assets. What are we looking at? What's deposit number one?
First, you have what the industry calls the category killer. It's a deposit called Tanbreeze, located in South Greenland. As we just talked about, mines in California or Australia mostly produce those light, rare earths.
Right.
Tanbreeze is completely different.
How so?
It is loaded with the heavy stuff. Estimates show that 27% of its rare earth content is those heavy isotopes, the dysprosium and terbium that the U.S. military is so desperate for. The deposit itself is valued at over $3 billion.
$3 billion. That's a significant asset for a country the size of Denmark.
It's huge, and the scale is just mind-boggling. We are talking about 4.7 billion metric tons of ore.
That's an astronomical number.
Yeah, it's enough to supply the entire Western world for centuries. It's not just another mine. It's a strategic reserve for the next 200 years.
Centuries. So this isn't a stopgap measure. This is the whole ball game.
This is the permanent solution to the China problem. But then you have the second deposit, Kavana Field, and this is where the pure geology crashes right into messy human politics.
The Kavana Field deposit, I read about this in the Foreign Affairs piece. This is the one they call the uranium knot, right?
Correct. Kavana Field is the world's second largest rare earth deposit. Massive potential. Huge. But the minerals are mixed geologically with uranium. You physically cannot get the rare earths out of the ground without also digging up the uranium alongside them. They are intertwined at the molecular level.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess the locals aren't thrilled about the idea of a giant radioactive mining operation in their backyard.
No, they are not. The local Greenlandic government, which is led by the Inuit Ataqatigiit Party, the IA Party, passed a zero-tolerance law banning uranium mining a few years back.
And when they did that,
they effectively froze the rare earth project, too. You can't have one without the other.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
The U.S. sees the ultimate solution to its biggest national security crisis sitting right there in the ground.
Yes.
But a local environmental law passed by a democratically elected government representing 57,000 people is blocking it.
Exactly. And this is where the U.S. solution comes in. The logic inside the White House became brutally simple. If the local laws block the mining, and the mining is essential for national survival, then the local laws have to go.
So the plan is?
The plan is to annex the island, make it the 51st state, apply the U.S. Defense Production Act over the top of any local objections, and mine it anyway.
It's a hostile corporate takeover. But instead of lawyers in suits, you use paratroopers.
That is a very, very apt way to put it.
But hold on. How do you even begin to justify this to the rest of the world? I mean, you can't just walk into the UN Security Council and say, we want their rocks. There has to be some kind of framework, right?
Well, you can if you invent a new diplomatic doctrine to fit the moment. This is what scholars in our source stack are starting to call the Don-Roe Doctrine.
A Don-Roe Doctrine, a play on the Monroe Doctrine, obviously.
Right. The Monroe Doctrine, historically it was about keeping European powers out of the Americas. It was defensive. It was about telling the old world to stay in the old world.
This is our hemisphere.
Exactly. The Don-Roe Doctrine is a maximalist, aggressive update. It essentially says, if it is in our hemisphere and we need it for our national security, we take it. It redefines sovereignty based on proximity and U.S. need.
And this isn't just theory. We've seen a test run of this, haven't we, in Venezuela?
We did. Just earlier this month, in January 2026, the U.S. executed a pretty brazen military operation in Venezuela to extract Nicolas Maduro. That proved two critical things to the rest of the world.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, risk tolerance. The U.S. demonstrated very publicly that it does not care about international condemnation. The UN screamed, Latin America screamed, and the U.S. just shrugged.
And the second thing?
Operational capability. It showed that naval blockades and special operations forces are active, current policy tools, not just bluffs or things you read about in history books. So, when the White House turned its gaze to Greenland and said they would acquire it the easy way or the hard way, European capitals didn't laugh this time.
No.
They looked at what just happened in Caracas and they realized the threat was very, very real. This wasn't a negotiation tactic. It was a notification.
So let's talk about the easy way first. Because there was an attempt to buy it, right? But not from Denmark this time. This was a different strategy.
This was the checkbook annexation strategy.
It was
bizarre in a very reality TV kind of way. The administration tried to bypass the Danish government in Copenhagen entirely and bribe the Greenlandic locals directly.
Bribe them?
They tried to buy the population.
Like just mailing them checks? How did that work?
Essentially, the reports state the offer involved direct payments, checks ranging from $10,000 up to $100,000 per person.
Wow. I mean, that is significant liquidity.
The condition was that they had to vote for independence from Denmark in a snap referendum and then for immediate annexation by the United States.
That is, I mean, look, for a fisherman in a remote village, $100,000 is life-changing money. That pays off the boat, that buys a new house. It's genuinely tempting.
It is, but this is where the U.S. completely miscalculated the human element. Yeah. They just assumed everyone has a price. And the reaction from Greenland wasn't greed. It was profound insult.
Backfired.
Massively. The Prime Minister, Mute B. Edged, rejected it immediately. He said, and this is a direct quote, "We are not a product to be sold. Greenlanders do not want to become Americans."
Turns out national identity costs more than a Honda Civic. Who knew?
It does. And that very public, very firm rejection is what pushed this whole situation toward the hard way. When the bribery failed, the U.S. Congress stepped in. We saw Republican Representative Randy Fine introduce the Greenland Annexation and Statehood Act.
Which sounds incredibly official and absolutely terrifying.
It's basically a declaration of intent. The bill explicitly authorizes the president to take such steps as may be necessary to acquire Greenland.
That language.
In legislative speak, that is a thinly veiled authorization for use of military force and AUMF.
And the justification. They can't just put, "we want magnets" in the text of the bill.
Of course not. They cited poverty in Greenland, claiming they were saving the people from economic stagnation. And get this, the danger of having a socialist government running a territory so close to the Arctic.
So it frames the invasion as a liberation mission.
A humanitarian intervention. Meanwhile, the Democrats are trying to block it.
Yes, they introduced their own bill, the Greenland Sovereignty Protection Act, to try and cut funding for any potential invasion.
Yeah.
So you have this completely surreal situation where the U.S. military is prepping cold weather gear and staging transport planes, while Congress is having a legal fistfight over whether invading one of our oldest allies is actually legal.
So the Pentagon is ready to go, but the checkbook in Washington is frozen in a partisan deadlock.
It's absolute chaos. But I want to pivot back to the military side for a second, because the sources are very clear that while the rocks are the catalyst, they aren't the only prize here.
No, it's rarely just one thing, is it? It's also about the map. The most important real estate in the Arctic. Greenland is home to the Pituffik Space Base, which was formerly known as Thule Air Base. This base is absolutely critical to U.S. national security.
That's a mouthful. What does it actually do for us? Why is it so important?
To put it bluntly, it stops us from getting nuked without warning. It hosts the AN/FPS-132 upgraded early warning radar.
Okay.
It detects missile launches from deep inside Russia or China. Because of its location at the top of the world, it has a clear line of sight right over the pole. It gives the U.S. the 15 or 20 minutes of warning time they need to respond to an attack.
So if we lose that base...
We lose a huge chunk of our nuclear early warning system. We go blind in the Arctic. It's a massive vulnerability.
But we already have the base.
Yeah.
We lease it from Denmark. We've been there since the start of the Cold War.
We do.
Yeah.
But Washington is terrified, paranoid, even that an independent Greenland, maybe one that's friendly with China or just tired of American pressure, might decide to cancel the lease.
Ah, so ownership solves the lease problem. Permanently.
Exactly. You can't evict the landlord if you are the landlord. If you own the land, you own the radar forever. And then there is the naval aspect, the GIUK gap.
The Greenland-Iceland-UK gap.
Right. This is the key naval choke point of the North Atlantic. During the Cold War, this was where NATO hunted Soviet submarines. Any Russian subs stationed in their Arctic bases have to pass through this gap to get into the Atlantic and threaten the U.S. East Coast.
And I've seen the reports. Russian sub-activity has been surging lately.
A massive surge in 2026. There was that really unsettling incident just a few weeks ago where a Russian Yasin-class submarine was caught shadowing a U.S.-seized oil tanker. It was a clear signal for Moscow.
Wow.
Controlling southern Greenland allows the U.S. Navy and Air Force to hunt those subs more effectively and, essentially, close that gate. It puts a big, heavy padlock on the Atlantic.
So from a purely strategic, cold-blooded military perspective, looking at the map, taking Greenland makes a terrifying amount of sense.
Strategically, yes. It secures the sensors and it secures the sea lanes. It is textbook geopolitical dominance.
But legally and diplomatically, it's a complete nightmare.
It is a catastrophe. It is an unmitigated disaster waiting to happen.
Okay, let's talk about the NATO elephant in the room, because this is the part that just breaks my brain. Denmark is in NATO. The U.S. is in NATO. Greenland is Danish territory. How does this work?
It doesn't. It just doesn't work. It breaks the alliance. It creates what military strategists call a blue-on-blue crisis.
Blue on blue.
That's the term for friendly fire, but on a geopolitical alliance-shattering scale.
Walk us through the treaty implications here. I'm looking at the text of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty.
Okay, Article 5. The most famous clause in modern history. It says an attack on one member is an attack on all. It is the core promise of the entire alliance. All for one and one for all.
Right. And usually we think of that as if Russia attacks Poland, the U.S. helps Poland.
Correct. But now, apply it to this scenario. The U.S. invades Greenland. Greenland is sovereign Danish territory. Therefore, the U.S. is attacking Denmark.
So Denmark has the right.
Denmark has every legal right under the treaty to invoke Article 5 against the United States.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So legally, France, Germany, the UK, they would be obligated to come to the aid of Denmark and fight the United States.
Legally, yes. It creates a legal singularity. If they don't honor the treaty, then NATO is meaningless. The promise is broken and the alliance dissolves instantly. If they do honor it, well, then World War III starts. But it's between the good guys. It pits the Western alliance against itself.
And the Europeans aren't just sitting back and watching this happen, are they? They're already moving pieces on the board.
They are not waiting. We have confirmation that France, Germany, and even non-NATO Sweden have deployed troops to Greenland in early 2026.
What are they doing there?
They are there under the guise of joint training exercises, but everyone knows what it is. They are there to reinforce Danish sovereignty. They are putting their own bodies on the line as a deterrent. A human shield, almost.
So just picture this.
Yeah.
U.S. paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne drop into Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. They hit the ground, weapons raised. And looking back at them down the barrel of a rifle isn't a Russian soldier or a Chinese regular. It's a French soldier.
Exactly, a French soldier. An ally, maybe someone they were training with last month in Poland. If a U.S. soldier pulls that trigger, it creates what the analysts call a blood debt.
A blood debt.
And that's something no alliance can survive.
Right.
It undoes 80 years of post-World War II security architecture in a single afternoon. It creates a rift that will never, ever heal.
And all for the supply chain. All for some minerals in the ground.
And here is the supreme irony. The twist that makes this a genuine tragedy rather than just another conflict. This entire invasion is designed to save the U.S. military supply chain.
Right.
But the logistics analysis in our stack predicts it will actually cause a supply chain heart attack.
Wait, how? If they get the rocks, don't they solve the problem?
No. Not for a long time, because of something they call the Valley of Death.
That sounds ominous.
It is. Think about the timeline. The moment the U.S. military moves on Greenland, what is the first thing China does?
They retaliate.
An embargo.
Immediately.
Yeah.
They will cut off all rare earth exports to the U.S. that day. Not one more gram of magnet material will ship to America. The tap gets turned off completely.
Okay, but in this scenario, we have Greenland now. We have the mine. We can just dig the stuff up ourselves.
But we have the rocks. We have the ore. We do not have the magnets. You cannot put raw ore into a missile guidance system. It needs to be processed, refined, separated, turned into metal, and then magnetized.
And we don't have the factories for that.
No. Remember, China controls 90% of the world's processing capacity. Building those kinds of processing plants, these are highly complex solvent extraction facilities, in the U.S. or in Greenland, takes years.
How many years? 5, maybe more. You need environmental permits, construction. You need to train a workforce. These are massive chemical engineering projects. They do not pop up overnight.
So there's a gap.
A huge gap. 5 years plus. That is the valley of death, a period where the U.S. is completely cut off from its current Chinese supply, but cannot yet use Greenland's resources because the refineries aren't built yet.
So by invading to secure the materials for the F-35 fighter jet,
Yes.
we actually ensure that we can't build any F-35s for at least 5 years.
Exactly. Instead of securing the fleet, the invasion grounds the fleet. It is a perfect act of self-inflicted strategic paralysis. You secure the raw material you need for 2032, but you lose the capability to fight a war in 2026.
And that's just the military side. What about the immediate trade fallout with Europe?
It would be absolutely devastating. If the U.S. attacks a European Union member nation, the EU will almost certainly invoke Article 42.7 of their own treaty. It's their version of a mutual defense clause. It forces them to act as a military and economic bloc, independent of the U.S. and NATO.
So we could see massive sanctions.
Sanctions, absolutely. Trade embargoes. And potentially the expulsion of U.S. forces from European bases. Imagine the U.S. military being kicked out of Ramstein Air Base in Germany or Aviano in Italy.
That guts our global power projection.
Completely. The U.S. ability to operate in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East relies on those bases. It's like burning down your house to kill a spider.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You might get the spider, you might secure the mine, but you have nowhere left to live. You have destroyed the very international order you built just to secure one resource.
It's terrifying.
It's fascinating how fragile these systems are. We assume the rules-based international order is this permanent, solid thing, but you put enough pressure on a critical supply chain, you remove a few key vitamins from the diet of a superpower, and all the rules just go out the window.
That is the core lesson here. The Don-Roe Doctrine suggests a future where supply chain management isn't conducted by procurement officers in suits anymore.
No.
It's conducted by special forces operators in the snow.
It fundamentally changes the definition of global trade.
It does. And for the rest of the world, for smaller countries, it poses a terrifying question. If the United States, the supposed leader of the free world, is willing to invade its closest allies for a few tons of dysprosium, what will it do when it runs out of water? Or food, or lithium?
That is a thought that is going to keep me up at night.
It should. It redefines what it means to be an ally and what it means to be secure in the 21st century.
So to recap this whole crazy situation, we are risking World War III between allies to get rocks that we can't process yet to build missiles that we won't be able to finish because of the embargo that will be caused by the invasion itself.
That is the vicious loop. It is a perfect circle of bad decisions, all driven by raw resource panic.
Well, on that cheerful note, we want to hear from you.
Yes, we definitely want to know where you all stand on this.
Okay, supply chain nerds, here is the question of the day. If you were the Prime Minister of Denmark and the U.S. President called you offering to buy Greenland to, quote, save the free world's missile defense systems, do you take the check or do you call in the troops? Sound off in the comments below.
It's a tough choice. Your national pride and sovereignty versus potentially global security. I'm really curious to see what the listeners say.
Me too. As always, thank you for diving into the madness with us. This was a heavy one.
It's been a pleasure, even if it is a bit scary to think about.
Thanks for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe and make sure to check out our other podcasts.